milyar TL'ye ulaşmıştır.
3.6 to 8.1
Girişim sermayesi
billion
yatırım
liras.
ortaklıklarında
Private
ise
equity
halka açık
investment partnerships,
olanlara
when
baktığımızda
we look
piyasa
at
büyüklüğü
that,
1,5
the
milyar
publicly
TL'den
listed ones
5,7
rose
milyar
from
TL'ye
1.5
ulaşmıştır.
billion to
Bu
5.7 billion
artış
Turkish liras.
trendinin önümüzdeki
This
süreçte de
uptrend
hızlanarak devam
will
edeceğini
accelerate
düşünüyoruz.
and continue
Ayrıca
in the
kitle fonlaması,
future.
crowdfunding
Also, crowdfunding
yöntemi de bu yıl fiilen hayata
has been
geçmiştir.
implemented this year.
10 adet girişim şirketi
10
kitle
companies
fonlaması yoluyla fon sağlamıştır.
has acquired funds through
Mevcut durumda
crowdfunding,
4 platform
and there are
yetkilendirilmiştir. Burada da
4
önemli
platforms
gelişmeler,
currently, and we see
küçük
important
tutarlarla
developments
sağlanan
there.
fonlar olmakla birlikte
Although
önemli
the
gelişmeleri
amounts
önümüzdeki
are little, we see
yıllarda göreceğiz.
important developments
Kitle
taking place in the
fonlaması
coming years.
gene
Crowdfunding
bu kongrede ayrı bir
will
panel, 13
also
numaralı
be
panelin konu,
discussed
yeni
in
nesil
panel
girişimcilik
13
finansmanı, kitle
separately as the
fonlaması
next
isimli
generation
bir panelde
financing
devam edecek.
option,
Orada da Sermaye
crowdfunding,
Piyasası
and
Kurulu'ndan
Capital
AFD
Markets
Başkanı,
Board
Aracılık Faaliyetleri
AFD
Dairesi
Chair
Başkanı Erman
from the
Çete
mediation
Beyefendi bir konuşma
unit,
yapacak.
Mr. Erman Çetin will have a
Şimdi ben
speech. Now, I
sözü
would like
daha
to,
fazla uzatmadan
without further ado,
reel
move
sektörde
on to our
girişim
speakers so
şirketleri
that we can
ne
listen
fon
to
sağlayan
the
yatırımcılarına
investors who provide
yatırım
private
alternatifi sunan
funding to private
ve
equity
bu amaçla
institutions in
mesailerin
the
ana
real
mesaisi bu
economy,
olan
who
portföy
actually
yönetim
have it as
şirketlerimizden
their main
Ak Portföy Yönetimi AŞ ki
business.
kendileri
Akport
Türkiye'de
Yönetim
kurulan ilk
AŞ
girişim sermayesi
is
fonunu
actually the
2016 yılında
first
hayata
private equity
geçirmişlerdir.
fund to be established in Turkey in
Göktürk Işıkpınar
2016.
Beyefendi'ye
Mr.
sözü teslim
Göktürk
etmek
Işıkpınar
istiyorum.
will
Göktürk Bey
be
ayrıca
speaking.
ayağının tozuyla geldi iki
Actually,
gün önce
he
Almanya'da
just came from
Berlin'de
Germany. He was in
girişim
Berlin 2 years
sermayesi
ago, and he
etkinliğinde
joined a
bulundu.
private equity
Uluslararası önemli bir etkinlik. İsmi neydi Göktürk
event.
Bey?
What was it? This
Süper
international
Ritual
event?
Evet. İsterseniz bir o izlenimlerinizden
Super
de
Ritual. Can you
bahsedebiliriz.
tell
Onun
us about your
da
impressions?
girişim sermayesi sektörünü nasıl
Let's look at
değerlendiriyorsunuz?
how you
Genel bir
evaluate the
bilginizi
private
rica
equity
edeceğiz. Buyurun.
industry in addition to that.
Çok teşekkürler
Thank you very much,
başkanım.
Mr. Chair.
Sizin de belirttiğiniz
As
gibi
you
Süper Return
stated,
aslında
Super
dünyanın
Return is the world's
sermayesi
biggest private equity
İki
event.
senedir yapılamıyordu Covid
It didn't take
sebebiyle. İlk
place
kez bu
for
sene
2 years
yüz
due
yüze
to COVID,
girişimcilerin
and
orada bir araya gelmesi
actually
mümkün oldu.
investors
Yani çok büyük
were
bir
able to
tabii
come face to
varlık
face
yönetim
this year for the first time.
alanı,
This is
girişim
a huge
sermayesi
asset
4,5 trilyon
management
dolar.
area worth
Yani
4.5
toplam
trillion
varlık
dollars,
ve
the
hakikaten
total
bu
size.
alanda faaliyet
And
gösteren
actually,
önemli
we
kurumlar,
see
Apollo, Vista,
important institutions like
Blackstone
Apollo,
gibi
Vista,
önemli kurumların
Blackstone, who
CEO'ları,
operate in this field.
business
Their
director'ları
CEOs
oradaydı.
and business
Ben birkaç
directors
tema var
joined
tabii
that
onları
event.
aktarmak
There are a
isterim.
few themes,
Yani bu
and
FED
I would like to
politikası
share them. Due to this Fed policy, the asset increases are set to swell. That's a theme. In parallel with that, the private equity funds actually have the target of using lower leverage, and there have been also remarks about the fact that the technology focused equities provide excessive funding, which means actually excessive funding for those companies, increasing the overheads and having this negative impact on the margins, and overcapitalization was therefore another thing underlined. So what are they going to do? These private equity funds, they're going to invest with a huge emphasis, actually they will have continued appetite, and they're going to be receiving funds. Also, these funds will have more efforts and costs for digitalization, data mining, or other issues. So the funds are told to be actually leaning on these investments as venture funds. Now, I would like to tell you about what we do as a venture capital firm in Turkey. Well, as you know, in recent times, Turkey have seen beautiful things. We are going to have a 4.9 point percentage growth, and that's important. when I look at the actually 2.5 EBITDA growth, and we see a supply shock in the last quarter and increased costs. But the cost for the 6 months are quite remarkable. Turkey, compared to other MSCI averages, is very cheap. And when you look at the actually revenues, it's five. MHR is around 13, and when you look at the other developing, yeah, my voice wasn't receiving. That's why I got a warning. So, and when we listen to the last action, call action, actually, this confirms the stability in Turkey and that the assets are quite attractive for investment, as confirmed. Another important topic, as we consulted with you, is having an alternative supply chain instead of China. The European companies want to have that replacement, and Turkey poses a strong advantage, and that's important in terms of venture capital too. And also, as you know, the freight is costly from China. So, in terms of FDI, we look forward to actually an increase. Turkey will go higher than $10 billion with the new dynamics, in my opinion. So when we come back to the actually entrepreneurship ecosystem that started before 2010, and as you know, in 2016, it entered our lives with the capital markets board actually regulation. The portfolio companies were given the initiative to create venture capitals. And we have seen 463 transactions in 2017, and in 163 of them, we are able to see the size of the transaction. In total, $5.7 billion worth of transactions took place, and it's a very significant number. We talk about FDI. Last year it was $3.5 billion, so $5.7 billion of FDI is good. And entrepreneurs are interested in certain industries, including technology. And here, gaming companies are prominent. Application design, software companies, e-commerce, marketing optimizations, human resources solutions. These are all outstanding themes. Mr. Götürk, I'm always curious about Turkey's strong, relatively strong superiority in the gaming industry. It appears as such and attracts investments. What do you think is the reason for that? What kind of an advantage do we have? Mr. Chair, this is, I think, about the quality education system. Actually, we see very capable students coming out of our universities who also have entrepreneurship spirits. I know that they, it will be actually an interesting remark, but they don't like wearing ties. And this generation want to shove themselves in creative fields. The world took notice of this, as well as the gaming entrepreneurs in Turkey. They have more comfortable working environments. They have more flexible working hours, so they show keener interest in this industry. I think this is about the power of the human resources rather than the capital actually power. So you say it shows the strength of our human resources. You say that we have educated actually talents and the potential, and there is no barrier to selling that. Peak Games, I think, was sold 2 or 1 year ago. Yes, it was an important exit, and we see a few unicorns. Actually, we don't see many unicorns in the region, and majority of the small number of unicorns came from Turkey. So technology and game focused actually investments take place in Turkey, and we see it in our discussions about return on investment. The investors want to have venture capital investments in Turkey, and they say that on different occasions for the coming periods. You referred to certain data. I do not mean to take up too much of your time. Yes, 80 venture capital funds were established. It reached an important size, and we have 39 pension actually companies and 12 investors. So it's like venture capitals are trying to provide solutions to the entire industry. We try to conduct an analysis. Maybe I can wrap up my part like this. We have a 50% share, and actually 50% uh, like uh, securities. When we compared it with a 50% actually venture capital investment, we looked at the data based on the companies operating since 2000 onward. So hybrid or flexible systems used in the pension business actually would benefit 2.6 percentage more from the allocation of venture capitals, and their standard deviation is taken only by 0.5% up. So actually for asset allocation, venture capitals appear as an important investment tool. Thank you very much, Mr. Göktuğ. We are going to give you another where you're going to take the floor again if you have the time. Now, I would like to leave the floor to Mr. Emrah Yücel, who deals with Turkey and worldwide venture capital funds. He is going to give us information about the overall industry, the areas that receive investment, the advantages provided to the funding companies, and also the role of the funds in big scale investments. Thank you very much, Mr. Uğur. At the outset, I would like to refer to a little about the definitions and then tell you about the sizes. As for the venture capital industry, when you look at where our transactions stand, you see that non-publicly listed companies or private markets actually have venture uh, capitals underneath them. What are their characteristics? Well, these are the companies that are not publicly listed and that are owned by private capital. Here, the transactions do not take place as in the organized stock exchanges around a certain arrangement or organization, but rather takes place through the transactions of investments or groups of investors or group of investors. And when you look at these private markets, you see a size of $7.5 trillion around the world, which means actually almost 9% of the global GDP. And this $7.5 trillion can be evaluated under three main categories. The first one is private equity, and Mr. Göktuğ stated that it has a size of $4.3 trillion dollars, and under this category we can refer to new companies, startups, or we can refer to growth companies or the companies that haven't been yet publicly listed, and also certain other funds that want to acquire other more advanced companies. And actually, it represents almost 60% of the big picture. So the biggest volume are actually embedded here. Also, venture capital is included here with a worth of $1.2 trillion dollars. And in venture capital markets, we see technology as the main investment preference. Software, trade, digital health, and fintech companies dominate this area, and they are the main investment themes. So we refer to the equity side, and then there's this borrowing leg, and the third category is the real, about the real assets, properties, infrastructure, and natural resources actually also receive other investments. So the private equity has corporate investors as the main investors, foundations, pension funds, government funds, or insurance companies are the main investors here. So when we look at Turkey, Mr. Gökner told us about the general venture capital world. I will not reiterate that part, but rather share some information about the funding side, as you stated. First, in Turkey, we see a regulation by the Capital Markets Board in 2014 for corporate organization of these investments, and then we see the portfolio management companies turning into venture capitals through the banks. And in 2017, we see the first issuances, or rather investments in this field. So in that period, we talk about 8 billion, almost 8 billion dollar, but the industry is new. We talk about 80 million sorry, the number is $8 billion Turkish liras. First, it was 80 million Turkish liras in the beginning. When we look at the growth in the last 2 years, there's this almost 400% growth in terms of venture capital funds, which means that actually this area is correctly addressed. And that also encourages us abundantly. When you look at the main activity areas, 35% is about infrastructure and energy, 31% focuses on mixed strategy, investing in different industries, 22% looks at IT and technology, and the remaining percentage deals with health industry. So here, venture capital funds have certain advantages, but before that, I would like to state that in this general venture capital ecosystem, entrepreneurship ecosystem, we see a change in the way of doing business. Here, we do not see big global or national companies uh, actually continuing the things as they are. They outsource these services, and these niche technology developing countries take their business to a certain level, and then they are within the radar of the big companies, which actually acquire these newly developed technologies by youth, and they integrate them. That means, of course, a benefit for the new for those companies, as well as the creation of industrial, actually, entrepreneurships by young minds, and they sort of channel their interest in these newly emerging areas. So it means changing the way you do business, and there are additional benefits of doing all this through the help of funds. When you look at it from the perspective of an investor, you see that they are individuals are able to access funds they cannot normally through the help of venture capital funds. As I stated at the beginning, they are not publicly listed companies, so the potential transactions can take place only through the professionals of this field. So investors cannot easily access this network. And these investments also require technical know-how. Uh, Although investors can have this as a theme in their minds, they might not have necessary technical requirements. So this is an advantage provided by funds too. Last but not least, if they want to take on actually businesses with bigger volumes, they face financial restrictions, and funds here actually approach it with a collective investment mentality, and corporate governance principle uh, are all provided to these investors who can overcome such financial restrictions thanks to this. Also, when you look at the portfolio and asset distribution of the investors, you see an optimization in terms of risks and returns. We see great contributions there because the investments by these funds uh, have a little correlation with the uh, capital markets investment. So that means an optimization in terms of portfolio investment theory. The capital markets board regulation actually enable these transactions to take place in a transparent way, and such venture capital investments require a different working uh, mechanism. That's why investors actually leave it to the funds. Here, you need a very detailed and well conducted feasibility study. Not only that, depending on the nature of the investment, technical, legal, financial, or tax related analyses and examinations must take place. And here, these cannot be easily managed by the individuals. And venture capital funds take on all this and these responsibilities, and they also enable investors to have a voice by providing certain shares. There are important tax advantages in our regulation. I will not elaborate on the details, but these are incredibly favorable advantages for individuals and institutions alike. Now, coming to your last question about the financing of big scale projects, well, as each portfolio, portfolio uh, we have adopted this model as part of the venture capital funds, uh, which focus on this area. The banking industry made important contributions to the financing of these projects, and they will continue to do so. But the diversification and increase of resources are important, and capital markets pose an important potential. The financing of these projects, of course, require long-term solutions, and the venture capitals also have uh, compatible actually terms. When you look at the project finances, you see that they were provided in FX so far, and actually the pricing can to, this is a reality resulting from the pricing of the relevant investments in foreign currency, and we believe that they represent an important potential. It is a long-term actually resource, and it can be balanced in terms of TL. And so we can create a long-term actually uh, venture capital market. I would like to give you a short example from the energy market. We actively invest in this industry. As each portfolio, we have 5 wind power plants, and the central and field operations of these power plants is handled by an operation company. We follow up on the developments there closely. In recent period, public authority had new arrangements about the pricing, about the renewable energy prices, and here escalations are important, and certain parts of the price are provided in Turkish lira and certain in FX. 52% will be subject to Turkish lira inflation, and 48 will depend on the dollar TL and dollar TL increase. So the companies providing financing there should be able to hedge themselves, but also should have access to Turkish lira financing. And here, venture capitals and other capital market tools and other also borrowing and capital mix will enable them to appear as a long-term Turkish lira financier. Last but not least, the long-term financing markets, if it is in FX terms, require you to look at the whole story from an FX perspective in income understanding. If we can ensure that Turkish lira is a leg of it, then the income projections and pricing uh, over time can be in Turkish lira, so we may overcome a dollarization actually uh, concern and turn the things in terms of Turkish lira. Thank you, Mr. Emrah. And you referred to the contribution of the venture capital model in terms of the development of Turkish lira financing. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Mustafa Yılmaz from Borsa Istanbul. He will tell us about what the private market provides to investors, the activities taking place, and also Borsa Istanbul projects about the venture capital market and crowd funding. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. At the outset, I would like to tell you a little about the market. As Borsa Istanbul, we attach importance to the venture entrepreneurship market, and we have a marketplace. We have been operating since 2015, and here we can refer to view of other borrowing tools, instruments, and where we have where we don't have actually such pairings. Rather, this is where we bring together the investors and entrepreneurship so that they can be funded. We have proactive initiatives there to provide such funding. Also, there are certain companies recommended from outside. We evaluate them based on the acceptance of our appraisal committee, and then we accept them as members to our council. Here there are three members. Entrepreneurship members, for example, is one of them. New ventures is the first one. The other one is emerging ventures. We talk about 10 million active asset or sales revenues. That's called emerging actually. And ventures, and then we see the newly emerging ones. We have 34 mediator and service providers, in addition to over 100 new ventures, and they provide our members in terms of consultancy. What do we do in terms of private marketplace? We have committee meetings, we have evaluation committees. Let me highlight it as such. In the committee, we do not have only evaluation board members. These are important investors in our entrepreneurship ecosystem. Also, we invite other investors, and here the startups and other companies are introduced, and here we create an awareness. There are direct meetings there. Also, as a continuation, as part of the entrepreneurship mechanism, we have B2B activities.
We work with the entrepreneurs that work business to business, and as Istanbul Exchange, we work with the large companies that are in the quotation, and we invite them over. They can promote their products, the entrepreneurial companies here. And the way the traditional companies work have changed, actually. And from that point, we are organizing activities to promote the B2B activities of these companies. We had done that before the pandemic, and we had to give a break because of the pandemic. But we're going to move on with such activities. And the large companies that are quoted in Borsa Istanbul, we are trying to raise awareness among the top executives of these companies. So about this private market, we have a website, istozelpazar.com. Detailed information can be obtained from there. We also have the contact info, and we would be happy with the communication, could be the phone or the website. About the entrepreneurial ecosystem, we want to create a capital as well. And the point here is, as Mr. Gökturk and Mr. Emrah mentioned, in recent years, we had made observations on the market, and there is a demand on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, venture ecosystem. A real estate fund even has told us that they have been working on transforming into venture capital. And we were happy with that, and we have been working on that. And in addition to that, as a marketplace that real exchange happens, we considered establishing an additional platform with OTC platforms and stock exchanges. We had made correspondence, and we spoke with shareholders, and we realized that there is a demand on that issue. There are similar platforms outside Turkey, and we started considering establishing one in Turkey. We have a draft on that, and we had a pre-meeting with Ms. Erman Çete, and we're going to have this issue covered, evaluated with Capital Market Committee. So there has to be at least 40 millions of size to have security offering to the public, that is public listing. Between 11 and 40 million, that is early stage, we call. A marketplace could be established for companies of this size. Our target is this group that would need fund between 11 and 40 million. And these are mostly tech companies. And the basic criteria here is that investment would be made under the guidance of a leader investor, a venture capital or venture capital partnership. An institutional, a corporate investment is going to give the first filtering. And for the companies that pass this filtering, companies that come with co-investment, that is between 11 and 40 million, are going to be evaluated by an investment committee that we're going to establish. So we have committee members in the private market, and we will also have an investment committee, as I said. And as this is going to be working on risk capital, we're going to try and provide a reliable ventures to our investors. So it is a stock exchange, Borsa Istanbul, and as much as possible, we're going to try and provide a standardized and safe investment environment, and the companies are going to be relatively more mature in this marketplace. As in the private market, in this platform that we're going to establish, we're not looking for profit. It's not an approach for profit for us, but in the coming years, we want to support the funding, and this we're going to try and involve the dynamics of the sector, and we're going to use the correct approaches in this capital. Just like in other capitals, it's not just about funding. The secondary market is going to take place, but do not consider it as a liquid market for the investors that want to exit or slide into a different area. We want to have an opportunity with the secondary market. And with this, we have been working with our shareholders, and let it be like a declaration. Whoever wants to contribute and share experience, we're happy. We would be happy to listen to them. As I said, we're not looking for profit here. We want to provide benefit to the ecosystem. About the MES funding, I'd like to say something. With the Capital Market Committee, the committee has entrusted us with certain responsibilities, and we have three institutions under our stock exchange. One of them is Barter Bank. They have made their integrations, especially cash management, regarding taking and blocking the relevant accounts, and when they're found successful, transfer of the amount to the enterprise account. So we are working in this regard. We have a central registry institution as well, and this is something that could be a role model for the rest of the world because it doesn't exist elsewhere in the world. You know, registration of the startups regarding mass funding, it is going to be a first. So they created a crowdfunding system, and it's going to facilitate the transfer of the ownership for the startups. In this system, certain controls are required for a venture company. For example, it should not do more than one investment, and they should not be demanding funding over 11 million. And as we have some individual investors, we have certain limitations, and based on being skilled investor or not, we're going to have certain limitations. As Borsa Istanbul, we are tasked with establishing the secondary market. As these are seed investments, the marketplace should not be misunderstood, and this is the kind of market that we're going to create as such. So the crowdfunding structure should be further matured, and we're expecting more companies to get involved in the funding. For these companies, where are we headed? We're going to be following these companies, and we're going to be following that. Thank you very much, Mustafa. In an active manner, you're taking action, and you have informed us about the projects that you are considering. As the capital market committee, I can safely say to all shareholders that in the existing settings, we can implement reasonable demands in a very fast manner. We're open to the sector in this regard. As we were talking, we were talking with Göktürk, and I'd like to talk about the last minute decision by the insurance authority. The ventures started to get into the radar of these institutions, and by an initiative of insurance chamber, about 2% of the overall amount could be invested in venture capital. So this is not a necessity, but it's an action to raise awareness. And we consider this as a beginning. So insurance funds are being basically pointed to this direction, right? Yes. So their balance resources could be transferred to this venue. This is how it's going to take place. And awareness already has started shaping up on that issue, and it's going to spread in a broader manner. If you allow me, can we move on with that a bit? We have about 18 minutes. Please speak up anything that you didn't say in the first round. We talked about different strategies, including infrastructure and crowdfunding. in the venture capital ecosystem, we have, the early stage and growth of financing. There are different categories. As ARC Portfolio, we're interested in SMEs and growth stage. I'm going to have to interrupt here. What do you mean with, enterprise companies here? The SMEs, how do they reach out to you? Well, how does the first contact take place? Can you give a real example without specifying the name? In the sector, we have certain intermediary institutions. And other than that, um, the retired finance experts are getting involved in the real sector. So there is a live network in early stages. Some universities have centers. They basically educate and raise entrepreneurs. So with agents and universities and other people who left the active work from the sector, that is the retired people, we are in connection with them. So after creating an awareness, this is how we're going to be working on. We have more than 308 investments. So you are investing like 3 out of 100 companies, right? Yes. Yes, the companies go through a detailed and meticulous process of evaluation. Almost all of them came from the advisory companies that we call four bigs. So it came from a network, basically, as the market actors know that we are investing, they are coming up with good opportunities. I'd like to talk about the SMEs. SMEs are very important. Their access to bank finance is very limited. 73% of the employment is done by SMEs, and 56% of the export is being done by SMEs. And it is a very important field. So what do we look into when we're investing? The large growth speed, if there's a competitive advantage in the market or not. And we look into exit strategies. Our funds are limited time funds. So normally 5+2, like 7 years. It goes up to 10 years at times. So our strategies are limited in time. About infrastructure funds, as their return period is longer, the period of funding is longer as well. So before the investment, you have to have a good exit strategy. So we are very meticulous, very careful on transferring our resources for the growth. So we want to finance the growth, basically. And we also buy the minority shares. So we don't look for a majority shares. So it's the reputation of the partner is very important here. That is in the sector. We represent our funds in the executive boards. By the way, we have a seat in the boards, and we have the right to pre-buy and forced sales. We get this despite the fact that we are a minority shareholder. We make annual budgets. To what extent do you get involved in the management? Do you have the reverse veto right? Yes, we do. We get that. We have the right to veto in certain decisions, and the key decisions are being kept under control because of that. And we follow the annual budgets, and in our business model, we have a common CFO. They provide support to a lot of companies. CFO is an expensive position, so not every company could undertake that cost. So the common CFO is providing support to all these companies. That person knows our reporting format, and she knows what we want. If necessary, accounting, finance, and HR structuring is supported through that CFO. We have SAP partners. The digital transformation. With this, we provide support to MIS systems. We're trying to contribute to the formation of corporate culture and common values. So you change the way the business is conducted, right? Yes. You get them utilize the scale economy, right? Yes. And in some companies, we have high turnovers. Some employees are leaving their positions, and we care about creating common values, and we work jointly with the advisors. The presence of a corporate worker changes the perspective of the employees, right? Yes. To manage large HR pools, we have been working with large HR companies, and this gives us the chance to follow who does what in this pool. With our advisors, in the past, we identified the KPIs in the factories, and we were involved in these processes. About lean production, we take a serious initiative. We have marketing advisor coming from Unilever and Pepsi, and we contribute to the formation of the marketing strategies. We also provide support for SDGs, and we take certain actions to measure that. All these 17 goals, not all of them, but 11 of them are being provided by 8 portfolio. Healthy and quality life, gender equality. We work with Turquoise and Bio. We are partners to these companies. We support accessible and clean energy. Industry innovation and infrastructure is another field that we provide support. Responsible production and consumption. Bio made the first agreement-based intermediary work, and we have 400,000 members there. We get involved in the climate works, and we get involved in the activities of energy savings and daylight usage. So we support the sustainable development goals, and I believe this is very important for the future of the venture capital. Sustainability is very important, of course. It's a key concept. Thank you very much for the clear examples that you provided. We have about 10 minutes left in the panel. I think Mr. Emrah has something to add. Thank you very much. In the framework of what Mr. Göktürk shared, I'd like to underline that individual investors have difficulty in access to this professional network, and it is a value in itself. And we go through concrete examples as professionals of this field. So it's not just about giving the right decision. We have to design the exit from the very beginning as well. So access to quality and right asset is very important for portfolio management companies. And in the past, we were doing processes in the monetary markets and capital markets, and we were working across a screen. And now we stepped into a different market, and this is an exciting development. So having an access to the right asset is an important part of what we're doing. The investment banks and intermediary firms have works on these issues as well. So investment funds are being listed, and this is an important development as well. So when we started doing this work, we were not potential addresses for this, but after certain closures, the venture capital funds started to be taken into account by the shareholders of the sector. We have 5 wind turbine plants and 133 megawatts of power. That's what we produce. And in the establishment period, we worked with about 100 initiatives. And so the rate of secure investment or turning it into investment is low percentage-wise, but we have to spend the necessary effort at the beginning and get access to the right initiative. So about the right to vote, the Capital Markets Council has an attitude on that as well, and it goes through shareholders. So from that point, the rights and responsibilities should be identified in the proper way. When the works are fine, when the life is moving on all right, well, we wouldn't have problems with that, but we should be ready for the rainy days as well. So we should have an agreement for shareholders, and with beautifully designed agreements, if we create partnership with such agreements, we protect the rights of the shareholders, and we would remove the dead ends in the management processes, right? So it's natural that when you're working in partnership, there could be some dead ends, some dilemmas at times. But once we have good agreement, all the 360 degrees of the environment would work quite all right. Thank you very much. We have like 5 minutes left. Would you like to add anything in addition, Mr. Göktürk, about the venture capital? Like to talk about other fields that we are active. I believe it's a beautiful example. We have Sabancı. We established Sabancı CVC Fund, and it's been active for a year. This is the first CVC established in Turkey, large holdings in Turkey. They were getting involved with small-scale works in venture capital. They work through a company, SPV, that they establish most of the time. But our structure is a bit different here. With business development of Sabancı Holding, policy development worked together and identified the potential together. And in the investment committee of Sabancı Holding, the opportunity is evaluated and finalized. So this is the first real CVC with a 30 million resource, and in energy for about 3 years we are providing service to Japanese, and the resource has been provided by the Japanese, by the way, and I believe it is important in this regard. So we have a Japan Gas Fund. They're investing in the established solar energy plants in Turkey, and we are ruling the flow of the process. And since 2006, we have 3 venture capital funds. We are actively working with these funds, and with capital markets, we are bringing the venture capital. They're slightly different, by the way. So it's like a technology fund for us, and here about 60% of the fund is used to source other funds. The regulations limit this, by the way, with 80%. In the funds established in Turkey, well, they could work through their retirement funds, and we have we are transferring resources to other um, colleagues of ours active in the sector. They're not overlapped, by the way. This is between 100 million and 200 million in a single transfer, by the way. We do our allocation between $2 to $5 million in a single transfer. In the technology funds of funds, we do, while the other funds are investing, we are co-investing with them. We are investing with them. So last year, we worked with 3 different early stage funds established outside the country, and we had a chance to do investment together in Turkey. Well, we have a lot to do in this sector. That's what I'd like to underline. All right. Thank you, distinguished panelists and participants. Thank you very much for being with us today. You have spared time. I know you have a busy schedule. I'd like to thank you one by one. With this, I adjourn the panel. I believe it has been an efficient